what's being stated by the Department of Homeland Security is, listen, it's not a question of whether or not there will be other terrorist attacks. There are going to be more terrorist attacks. We're not telling you that there are going to be more terrorist attacks because we want you to be fearful. Just like we're not saying, the National Weather Association is not telling you that there's going to be a hurricane attack so you can go panic. We're telling you that there are going to be more terrorist attacks so that you recognize what you need to do in order to best prepare yourself. The things that go beyond your preparation, that's why we have, that's why we have the Marine Corps and the National Guard and so on and so forth. We're going to do our part, but I'm talking on behalf of the government now, right? We're going to do our part, but make sure, citizenry, that you do your part. So we need to know explicitly what our part is. The one thing that I can say is the government can be a little bit clearer on exactly what it is they want us to do. Again, I'm a researcher, so I'm digging through .gov files nonstop. I have references like this to guide me. Without this, I would never be able to navigate my way through this, right? But John and Jane Doe, in the middle of Florida, in the middle of the United States of America, where is it that we go, right? Where do we go to get this information, how we prepare ourselves? I can't say that I can answer that, and that's a shame, right? There needs to be a better dissemination of this information by the federal government so that we know how to best prepare ourselves. So if a direct attack is placed, right, to destroy the infrastructure, and our water is contaminated, then we need to know how to deal with that. If an indirect attack is placed, and God forbid something like Disney World or something is, and I shouldn't even be saying this, right? But a major site is attacked, not because it's the destruction of the site, but because of the chaos that's going to ensue because of that attack, like the September 11th attacks. We need to know what we need to do, right? So the government really, it's there. I'm not saying that this information isn't there because it's all public information. I searched and did it, but I've honestly put in probably close to 100 hours of research for this lecture, and it's not easy to be able to find all of this information and compile it into one source. So I think our government can make it a little user-friendly. I don't think it's really user-friendly, and I think preparedness is important for the people because it's what we can do, right? So National Preparedness Presidential Policy Directive PPD-8. This was signed March 30th, 2011. A couple of days ago, right? This was like a month ago. This was signed March 30th, 2011. We need to create a culture of preparedness, right? And I'm talking about this now. And I read through the Presidential Policy Directive that speaks to, it's not very long, that speaks to preparedness, and they are now currently, and President Obama has issued the directive that there's 180 days from March 30th that we need, so our government is currently in the process, as I'm shooting this video, of talking about how we're going to best assess preparedness. It'll be interesting to see what the government says that they want us to do. I hope, if I'm not trying to, hubris is the fall, right? I would hope that they would see that the population wants to know from them, right? As an educator, I want to know, because I can't say explicitly without a few links that I've provided in the document that there is a clear civilian preparedness initiative. Here's how you prepare yourself directly for, I did provide a link, but it wasn't really anything explicit. Here's how you prepare yourself for this. Here's how you prepare yourself for that. Here's what you need to have. Here's what you don't need to have. Here's how, let the people know. So they're in the process of going through this preparedness as I'm shooting this video, and I think maybe the end of August, September, so, like maybe September, October, hopefully there's some like national, discussion on preparedness, right? Because I think this is the next phase of Homeland Security, and it's nothing that we need to be fearful of. We are going to be attacked again. You can imagine that it's going to, unfortunately, probably be New York many, many times, because that's, again, a great indirect, it's a good indirect source of attack, financial hub. Direct attacks are probably going to happen. We need to know how to prepare ourselves from direct attacks. And the exploitation of infrastructure is going to happen, so we need to know how to prepare ourselves from that exploitation. What I would say before I go into the definitions is that for each form of potential attack, there needs to be its own preparedness. I don't know that government officials go through YouTube. Well, I do know about open source intelligence, right? So if they're doing the open source intelligence, hopefully they recognize. But I mean, just conceptually, right? If you have 3 forms of attack, right, and you have direct, indirect, and direct, indirect, and exploitation, right? So we talked about direct attack, we talked about indirect attack, we talked about exploitation. There needs to be a corresponding preparedness, right? Here's how we prepare. P-R-E, if I could spell today, P-A-R-E-D-N-E-S-S, right? I would imagine the preparedness for a direct attack would be different than the preparedness for an indirect attack, would be different from the preparedness from an exploitation attack, like with respect to infrastructure, right? So with respect to infrastructure, I mean, because we're the ones that are going to be in those infrastructures when they are attacked, or we will be the ones that will be affected by the collapse of the infrastructure when the infrastructure decays and is destroyed, right? So in a sense, you know, preparing for biological, radiological, chemical, explosive, nuclear, there isn't much that the population can do for that. That's all EMS, public administration stuff, right? The regular John and Jane Doe, me as a regular civilian, there's nothing I can do. There's definitely something I can do to prepare for this, because the infrastructure is how we move through the infrastructure day to day, every single day. All of the citizens and residents and visitors move through the infrastructure. So I think this is where we can best prepare. How do we prepare? Let us know. So that's just my 2 cents there. The term national. So now I'm just going to read, and I think this concludes the yeah. So I'm just going to read now, and then I'll conclude this segment of the analysis. The term national preparedness refers to the action taken to plan, organize, equip, train, and exercise to build and sustain the capabilities necessary to prevent, protect against, mitigate the effects of, respond to, or recover from those threats that pose the greatest risk to the security of the nation. National preparedness. We have to protect ourselves from all of those lists, right? Mitigate it, decrease it, protect, make ourselves aware to the greatest risks, right? When we talk about security, security refers to the protection of the nation and its people, vital interests, and the way of life. You know, that way of life is important, right? We need to secure that. Resilience refers to the ability to adapt to changing conditions and withstand, rapidly recover from disruptions due to emergency. Resilience is going to be key, both for our government and for the population. When we're talking about preparedness, resilience is sort of how quickly we bounce back. Right? We have to be a very, very resilient population, right? So that if there is a terrorist attack, and it's a significant attack, it's a direct attack, and it contaminates something, or there's mass disruption of, you know, services because of the attack, we need to believe that, and our government has to be able to restore that direct infrastructural abuse attack as quickly as possible. But the population needs to be able, so for example, let's say the water's out and the water's contaminated and we recognize it. Federal government gets on TV, says, hey, hub has been destroyed, but you guys have been prepared and duly warned, so all of you already have sufficient water stored or stockpiled in your garage. It's time to take that water out and blah, 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 blah. You have iodine capsules and blah, 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 and whatever, right? So preparedness. Prevention. The term prevention refers to those capabilities necessary to avoid, prevent, or stop a threatened or actual act of terrorism. Prevention capabilities include, but are not limited to, information sharing and warning, domestic counterterrorism, and preventing the acquisition and use of weapons of mass destruction. Most of the preventive stuff goes to my discourse on human intelligence in the various forms. Not lots civilians can do here. The only thing you can do is, you know, report things that look suspicious, right? And I've talked about that before. The term protection refers to, this is E, the term protection refers to those capabilities necessary to secure the homeland against acts of terrorism and man-made or natural disasters. Obviously a all hazards approach, right? We're talking about both man-made and natural disasters, as well as terrorist attacks, right? Protection capabilities include, but are not limited to, defense against weapons of mass destruction, agricultural and food, critical infrastructure, protection of key leaderships and events, border security, maritime security, cyber security, blah, 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 right? Very, very, very important. The term mitigation refers to those capabilities necessary to reduce the loss of life and property by lessening the impact of disasters. Mitigation capabilities include, but are not limited to, community-wide risk reduction projects. Now we're talking about the civilian population specifically. What I would say is that in this national discourse, which is probably happening behind closed doors, though it's not private, I mean, I found this information public, we need to be discussing this publicly more, right? 3 forms of potential threats: targets, attacks, direct, indirect exploitation, 3 variations of preparedness, and also the role of the community to mitigate this, right? Mitigation capabilities include, but are not limited to, community-wide risk reduction projects, efforts to improve the resilience of critical infrastructure and key resource lifelines, risk reduction to specific vulnerabilities from natural hazards, and so on. The term response refers to those capabilities necessary to save lives. Obviously, this is EMS stuff, public administration stuff. And then lastly, the term recovery refers to those capabilities necessary to assist communities affected by incidents to recover effectively, including but not limited to rebuilding infrastructure systems, obviously, after they've been destroyed, providing adequate interim and long-term housing for survivors, restoring FEMA role, restoring health, social, community services, and so on, right? And then the last is strengthening and unifying, and I'm actually not going to write this down because I'm not going to talk about this at all, but I just wanted to list it. Strengthen and unify Department of Homeland Security Operations and Management. They have internal work that they have to do. I'm not inside of the government, so I don't know how they're going to do that. And it doesn't make sense that I discuss it or lecture on it. So what I wanted to do in this segment of the video is to go about talking explicitly about a contemporary approach to the overall strategic analysis of our strategy to secure ourselves, and to let you know that while I'm shooting this video, our government is currently, right now, discussing preparedness, and hopefully they give us some really good insight into how we can better prepare ourselves for the inevitability as citizens, and that will allow us to live better lives, right? And that will allow us to live not in fear of the inevitability, but prepared for the inevitability, and hope that our government will do its best to protect the population. With that, I want to thank you for taking the time to watch my videos. I will continue the discussion with Section 5. I'm Dr. Jason J. Campbell. Goodbye.